You know that feeling when you read some philosophy and it gets you? Like it sees right into your soul. But then nothing actually changes. You're still stuck. Well, today we're going to dive into a text that explores exactly that feeling. It's all about the limits of these big, profound ideas when you're facing real, quiet distress. So, the material we're looking at kicks off with this brilliant metaphor. It says there's a huge gap between the map and the swamp. The map? That's philosophy. It's clean, it's elegant, a perfect theory of human suffering. But actually living it? Man, that's the swamp. It's messy, you can't see where you're going, and no matter how good that map is, it cannot physically pull you out of the mud. And this is where we meet our main character. Let's just call them X. Now, X isn't any one specific person. X is all of us, really. Anyone who's ever felt that low-grade, persistent kind of trouble that you can't really put a name on. There's no big drama, no easy fix. They're just living right there, in that gap between the map and the swamp. And that sets up the big question for this whole explainer. Can three of history's greatest thinkers actually pull X out of this? We're going to see three giants of existentialism. We're talking Heidegger, Sartre, and Camus show up one by one. They're bringing their A game, their most profound ideas. But the real question is, will any of it actually work? Okay, so first we really need to understand what X is going through. And it's not some big, sudden crisis. The text has this great phrase for it, an ordinary emergency. It's not a dramatic movie plot, it's more like a landscape you're stuck in. It's just flat, quiet, and it's there every single day. At the very core of this whole thing is something X calls the weight. And we have to be clear, this isn't just sadness or feeling tired. It's described as this deep physical shift, almost as if someone cranked up the dial on gravity just for you. Sleep doesn't fix it, and the simplest things, like lifting a spoon to your mouth, that suddenly feels like a huge accomplishment. And this is the central problem right here. X reads these philosophers and has this incredible moment of recognition. Yes, that's it. They get me. They absolutely nail the diagnosis. But that's all it is. A diagnosis isn't a cure. And feeling seen, as great as that is, doesn't actually make that weight any lighter. Okay, so first up to the plate is Martin Heidegger. And if we're sticking with our metaphor, his philosophy is that perfect, beautifully detailed map of the swamp. It shows you every tree, every puddle, exactly where you're standing with pinpoint accuracy. The only problem? It doesn't show you a way out. So Heidegger's big idea here is something called thrownness, geworfen in the German. He basically tells X, listen, you were just thrown into this life. You didn't pick your parents, your body, when you were born, any of it. And for a second, that feels amazing, right? It's a huge relief. It's not my fault. It's just the situation I was thrown into. But there's that gap again. The promise of philosophy is that it gives you a language, a word for your condition. But in X's reality, knowing the word thrownness doesn't change a thing. The spoon is still just as heavy. The brilliant insight doesn't translate into any actual functional help. Heidegger has this great analogy to explain this: the hammer. Think about it. When you're using a hammer, you're not really thinking about the hammer, right? It's just an extension of your arm, doing its job. He calls this ready to hand. But what happens when the head of the hammer breaks off? All of a sudden, you're not hammering anymore. You're just staring at this useless object, this problem in your hand. That's present at hand. And for X, the entire world has become that broken hammer. Every single thing that used to be easy and automatic is now a problem to be stared at. All right, Heidegger's map was accurate but useless. So who's next? In walks Jean-Paul Sartre. And if Heidegger's idea of thrownness was kind of a cold comfort, what Sartre brings to the table, well, it feels less like help and more like a cruel taunt. Sartre's whole deal is this: you are radically, absolutely, even terrifyingly free. Every single second of your life is a choice you are making, and you're responsible for all of it. There's no hiding. Even refusing to choose, guess what? That's a choice too. His famous line is that you are condemned to be free. There's just no escape. And here we see that clash again between the promise and the reality. The promise from Sartre is, hey, you're totally free. You can just choose your way out of this right now. But for X, who is literally struggling with the physical weight of existence, who has zero energy, this doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like an accusation. It's like someone yelling, just run, at a person with a broken leg. It completely ignores the fact that making a choice takes energy and X's tank is on empty.
Now, Sartre has a term for when people try to escape this freedom. He calls it bad faith. That's when you pretend you're a fixed object, when you say things like, oh, I can't help it, it's just who I am. But that is not what's happening with X at all. X isn't running away from freedom, they're paralyzed by it.
So, we've had the cold diagnosis and the unbearable freedom. Finally, our last visitor shows up, Albert Camus. And he seems to bring a totally different vibe. Almost cheerful, a kind of defiant smile in the face of a meaningless universe. Camus' all about confronting what he calls the absurd. That's the clash between our desperate human need for meaning and a universe that is completely, totally silent on the matter. And his solution? It's all wrapped up in the myth of Sisyphus. You know the guy, doomed to push a boulder up a hill for eternity, only to watch it roll back down. Camus' radical move is to say, one must imagine Sisyphus happy.
So the philosophical promise here is beautiful. It's poetic. Find joy and meaning in the struggle itself. Rebel against meaninglessness by embracing it. But for X, in the real world, this just feels like an impossible task. Look, it's one thing for an author to say his fictional character Sisyphus is happy. It's another thing entirely for a real, tired person, someone who's completely drained, to just decide to be happy with their rock. You can't just flip that switch. So after these three philosophical heavyweights have come and gone, the core idea of this text really comes into focus. And it's important to get this. The argument isn't that Heidegger, Sartre, or Camus are wrong. Not at all. The argument is that there's a gap between their ideas and real life, a gap that even the best philosophy just can't seem to cross.
So what does that leave X with? After these monumental systems of thought have been tried and have, frankly, failed to help, what's left? Is the answer just nothing? The problem is that something essential gets lost in translation from theory to reality. To sum it up, Heidegger's map is perfect, but it's not the swamp. Sartre's radical freedom is like being handed the keys to a sports car when you have absolutely no gas. And Camus's happy myth? It feels like it's for gods and heroes, not for tired people just trying to get through the day.
But here's the thing. The story doesn't just end there in despair. It shifts. It moves towards something quieter, maybe more honest. It stops looking for a grand cure and instead focuses on what's actually left behind after all the philosophers have packed up and gone home.
And it turns out what's left is not nothing. In fact, it's something really profound. Philosophy did leave some gifts. It left a language, words like thrownness that can help you name the thing you're feeling. It left the clear-eyed honesty of knowing that a theory can only take you so far. And maybe most important of all, it left the quiet, unheroic dignity of just continuing, of keeping going, even without a big, fancy philosophical reason to do so.
And the text we're exploring ends on this incredibly powerful and simple line. It's not about some triumphant, epic victory. It's not about finally reaching the top of the mountain. It's about the small, the quiet, the totally unglamorous, and yet unbelievably difficult act of just getting up. And maybe, just maybe, that simple act, repeated day after day, maybe that's a philosophy all by itself.